Hi everyone, this is Hassan Jaffer, the astrologer, and I was looking at Gabrielle Petito's chart, and I've noticed that a lot of people have completely misjudged, and there's nothing like astrology which can analyze the human mind, because we have thousands of charts of singers, of artists, of athletes, of composers. People have gone before us, and we can analyze the human mind based on that. There's nothing like it in psychology and all that, like it's just conjecture and everything else. But here we can actually see the scientific data, like when we do a lot of research. And her chart shows her to be an extremely versatile and multitasking person. She had Mercury in the sign of Pisces, very close to Jupiter. That's like a good preacher, a very good-hearted soul, what I call a comfortable sadness to her voice. That's Mercury in Pisces, one of the most inspirational signs. The Sun in Pisces and Mercury in Pisces, very humanitarian. She was also getting an aspect from Pluto to her Mercury, and this is a once in a lifetime type of aspect, once in 246 years. And it's a beautiful aspect where you are able to influence the world. So I'm sure there's a mission involved here, which I'll talk about later on. Anyway, so Mercury in Pisces is a very healing aspect, and Jupiter close to it makes it like a good preacher. And in mass education, Jupiter being close to Mercury is always... See, she was not an intellectual person. She was more wise than pure intellectual. She's not a theoretical person. She feels the truth. It's the realization of truth. That's why I find Mercury in Pisces one of the most healing aspects, even the tonal quality of the voice. And it's very close to Jupiter. So Jupiter's expansion of the mind. So she's very versatile. And in fact, I saw her postcard. She's actually quite artistic also. She had Venus in Taurus, which is extremely loyal, but it's very close to Saturn, same degree actually, both 1 degree Taurus. So Venus, and she was a Pisces, with Venus and Saturn being close together in Taurus. Now Saturn makes a person very lonely when it's close to Venus. It's a fear of rejection. And her saying that her feelings of abandonment, that she was very concerned that she would be abandoned, and she was abandoned, unfortunately. It's her van, which, he took also. So the lonely aspect in her chart, now Venus-Saturn is a bit like Venus in Capricorn, and Brian has Venus in Capricorn. That's also a bit of a lonely placement, and that's one thing they had in common with each other. There was definite love between them. In communication they were a bit different, but their Venuses trying each other in terms, they're both earth signs. He had Venus in Capricorn. It's a bit of a lonely placement, which also makes it very difficult for people to express their emotions. Like Elvis Presley was born with that. Mel Gibson is born with that. Brad Pitt is born with that. And that's that Venus being the sign of Capricorn. And it's a lonely placement also, but they had that in common. It also makes a person, a bit of a father figure to some extent, And she was definitely involved with someone, like she liked someone who was at least 4 to 7 years older than her. That's Venus being close to Saturn in her chart. But the lonely aspect was very strong. Now she's very wide aspects in her chart. And in astrology, they normally take only 3-4 degrees, but I don't agree with other astrologers at all. I found the actual cases to be, broader aspects. For example, she had a Mars, Saturn, Neptune, T-square. Now, it wasn't exact T-square, but it's close enough, because the Mars-Neptune gives her obsessions and any addictions, but also mental stress, a lot of mental stress. And she definitely had that. Now, she did have some deep phobias, because Saturn was squared to Neptune. That's a close square. That gives all unwarranted fears of loneliness, etc. So that was exaggerated even more. And she actually had concerns for it. Now, people tend to set themselves up for it also. They make it very difficult for people to love them. If they still love them, there must be true love. So they need that assurance. But I'm quite positive that she knew that he did love her also, even though they had altercations and all, these aspects. Now, she had Moon in the sign of Aries. And she was like a pioneer and a poet at the same time. The poet part being Pisces, but the pioneer part being like an Aries. So that's the daring, adventure side, an impulsive side. When she wants something, she wants to do it right away, and action-oriented. That's a Moon in Aries. Now, Moon was 22 degrees Aries, and Saturn was 1 degree Taurus. It's actually 9 degrees away from each other. I would take it as a conjunction for sure. The Moon-Saturn conjunction is a lack of iron, which can create a lot of problems in people. In fact, when they talk about children, when autism is triggered off, I personally believe that if children are anemic, you should never vaccinate them or be very careful at that time. You can also go through it by transit. So she must have been anemic, and also underactive thyroid. That's a Saturn being the sign of Taurus, lack of iodine, etc. The Saturn moon aspect is one of the aspects of classic depression, of aloneness. And for a person to be so loyal, and on one side she needs so much of cuddling and affection, and at the same time with Saturn moon aspect in the family, when you feel very alone, it's a clinical depression aspect actually. That's the Saturn moon theme. And at the same time, moon is in Aries, which is so bubbly and effervescent on the outside, but the ability to be alone also, to be almost cruel with yourself and taking all the blame to yourself. That's all that Saturn moon aspect. And moon also was close to Venus. It's 9 degrees off, but it's also conjunction. And last 2 years, Saturn did touch off that moon also in her chart, which makes people feel a bit alone. But throughout this year, from last December of 2020, December, right till about December, she would have felt extremely lonely. It's one of the aspects of separations and divorces, because Saturn was touching off that Venus also in her chart. And that's not an easy aspect. So the T-square that she's born with, so Mars-Saturn opposition gives temper. Again, it's 11 degrees off. Other astrologers won't take it, but I definitely would take it. It gives sudden bursts of temper, and also it makes them accident-prone. Mars was in Scorpio. And also Mars squared to Uranus. Now that's a very close square. Mars-Uranus square is one of the aspects of freak accidents to the head and spine. And Princess Diana and many other people like Paul Walker, many times when they had accidents, they had the Mars-Uranus being touched off also. So the Mars-Neptune is a nightmare theme, and allergic reactions, or sometimes it can go into drugs and alcohol, etc. But it compounds this whole thing in a chart. But Mars-Uranus is one of the aspects to do with the spine, but freak accidents also to the head area. So the accident configuration is most definitely there in her chart. So on one side she has this side, the other side she's like a savior. And one thing which would have, the tears were guaranteed in her chart, but who she cries for was a free choice. She was not into self-pity or anything. She just was extremely lonely and didn't want to be abandoned. That's a very real thing in her chart. And it's very sad that he left her all the way in the desert, and he comes back in the van, her van. And even that night, this police were absolutely, I think it's absolutely a stupid thing to leave her alone completely in the van and ask him to go to a hotel to separate. All she needed was a hug. That's all she needed. And here he is laughing and, with the police when he's talking, completely calm, and she's totally distraught. And in depression, you can see that she's totally like a helpless vulnerability about her. So she may have scratched on that. He also touched her head or something, so she, maybe even in defense that she scratched him. But that's not, or slapped him, for example. That's a typical Moon in Aries thing. It's not like a big legal major case that they make out of it. They speak to them for like 1 hour. And even when he's asking, they think about it very deeply, very steady. Don't just think like that. When you slapped her, what did you intend? I mean, these absolutely stupid things. He's a 22-year-old, and it's not really like a, she's mature in some aspect, but she's still a very innocent type of person. And there was absolutely no aspect of real love there. And they're saying there's no need to cry. Like here she's depression, and her whole life is turning around. It's like a major separation and divorces. People do crazy things when they are depressed. Now in his case, he has Venus in Capricorn, and a lot of people when they're lonely, they do a lot of crazy things also. Now in his case, he's a Scorpio. By the way, 11th September moon was in Scorpio also at that time. So there's a definite strong life-death situation type of aspect that was showing. And her chart, it touched off on Mars also, but I think she was gone before that. The Pluto-Mercury conjunction that she has, on one side he has Mercury in Sagittarius, which is very philosophical type of aspect, but it's also anti the whole system. With that Mercury-Pluto conjunction, when you violate the divine truth, Pluto-Mercury can make a person almost a bit cruel. It's not like a Mercury in Scorpio, but it's a bit similar. And being self-righteous, but at the same time the Pluto-Mercury aspect, that he could be cruel without probably realizing this aspect also. In his words, I mean. And she was totally distraught, and they were both very insecure in terms of love matches, which brought them together in the first place. But there was definitely a bond between them. His Mars in Capricorn exactly touched off her Venus and Saturn also. So there were some very strong bonds between them in terms of love matches and relationships, definitely. It's just that she just reacted to it, and He was the most romantic type person because Venus in Capricorn gives a good appreciation for the material things. They would rather give somebody a house than say, I love you. Now, in the sky, Uranus is in Taurus, and it was touching off that T-square in her chart. It was touching off her Mars also, which is the aspect of the danger in a person's life, and also the sudden involuntary action because of the spinal cord or any aspect to do with the spine. The freak actions, the head and spine, that was getting touched off also in her. The Mars was in Virgo and opposing her Mercury and the Sun sign, which also makes a person more aggressive in their speech. So she may have said some words and all that, but that's not to really take it so seriously. But the fact that he was living with his parents and all that, it's a bit of a mama's boy on one side. Yes, he's got a strong mind. He was also quite versatile, having that Mercury in Sagittarius, but it's like a preacher also. But when you violate the divine truth, that's a Mercury-Pluto aspect, and that's a very difficult aspect. And when you say things where you can destroy people almost at the soul level, but you cannot undo the damage. Now, he also had a Mars-Moon opposition, which can give a bit of temper as well. He was also born with an accident configuration. First of all, Saturn-Venus square, and she was born with Venus-Saturn conjunction. So they both have this real lonely aspect, and where you cannot find happiness. In his case, it's a dangerous aspect. Also, the Venus in Capricorn, when people feel completely as if there's no hope when it comes to finding love, they do crazy things too. So he was born with that, plus he had a Mars-Saturn square configuration as well, which is wrong timing as well, or sometimes trouble with the law and authority conflicts. And so on one side, he's got this need to preach, but where you can go wrong from time to time. The relationship, as I said, there was a strong bond between them, but his Saturn almost touched off her Moon, which is that, it would always make her feel very sad also. Now, when she posted her Instagram, by the way, she would have been a very good influencer. This is the perfect chart for somebody who loves to communicate. It's almost like a gossip aspect. Many gossip columnists have Mercury in Pisces, but she would have been fantastic in telling all the stories and all. He didn't believe that he could do it, but I don't think it meant as a put down in his case. Like, he just had a strong mind. So if somebody pushed him, for example, he would have liked somebody to tell him that, you cannot do this, and then that would motivate him. So he just had that mentality. I don't think he personally wanted to just put it down that you cannot do it, for example. That's why. So he just felt that he didn't want her to be disappointed or something. So I don't think I think he would have been a good motivator, but he also could be very cutting with people also. But I don't think she took that personally. She would have done it anyways. And she would have been very good in all the vlogs and all that for sure. She's like a storyteller. That's that Mercury in Pisces aspect to Jupiter. Now, the final Instagram which Gabby sent, Moon was in Aries at that time, touching off his Saturn. So there was a definite sadness in his chart also at that time. And also, she would have been a bit angry also. Like, Moon in Aries makes a person take impulsive actions that time. So everything is building up to like a perfect storm, unfortunately. And 27th, so 25th, she sends out her Instagram. 27th, her van is spotted by this lady who just happened to be there because it was the 17th birthday of her son, who had passed away in an accident while going to Disneyland when he was 7 years old. It's so strange, that Ethan fellow. I think there's a sort of a blessing there in that aspect, that he's, somehow involved with this whole thing now. So between 25th and 27th is all what has happened here. So 25th, Moon is in Aries. He's feeling depressed, and she's in a bit of an angry mood also. On one side, very vivacious and all that Moon, but then right after, Moon goes into Taurus. When they found the van 2 days later, Moon was in Taurus, touching off her Saturn, which is extremely lonely aspect. So somewhere in between, I feel this has happened. So there are 2-3 things which really bother me. First of all, the police, when they asked them to separate each other, and not talking about love or anything at all, that they, there's no emphasis on, people having differences. Like, it seems only as immediate, they talk about being separate, but not talking about the prime cause of this. When people are alone and all that, all they need is just some hug each other. Or they hug each other before going to the hotel, for example. I think it could work, miracles like that. Now, telling him to go to the hotel and just leaving her completely abandoned in the desert, all by herself, I think that's absolutely a stupid thing on their part. I think they should have helped her go to the hotel, something also. And they shouldn't have just abandoned her if they were being like that. Now, when she spoke to her father the last time on August 21st, Moon was in Aquarius at that time, touching off Jupiter, which is a very happy aspect. So that actually was quite a positive day for her. That's why she didn't say anything about any negative things. Now the day must have started out positively. Moon was in Libra when she slapped him on that day. Moon was touching off a Jupiter before. So she was in a good mood that time, but in his case, it was showing it was touching off his Saturn exactly, plus the Mars. So it makes him angry, but also extremely sad and depressed. But Moon in Libra is an aspect of relationships also. And so it's definitely there's a relationship angle there, that she's feeling lonely and abandoned. That's why she's just distraught. I don't think it was that she was being violent or anything like that at all. That's a complete wrong perception. Now, although she was getting a Pluto sextile to her Mercury, which brings people very close to truth, and these 2 years would have been very powerful for her for mass communication, especially throughout next year when Jupiter would have touched off that Mercury as well. But at the same time, Neptune was sitting on her sun sign in Pisces and going over that Mercury for the next 2-3 years, which is a lot of mental confusion when people are confused about their goals in life. And it's a very spiritual aspect, but it's difficult to separate truth from fantasy. Although in her case, having Mercury in Pisces would have been easier for her to understand, because her natural state was to understand all different sides. But Saturn was touching off her Mars. There was an accident configuration in the sky, while Uranus opposing that Mars almost exactly. So there were both the lonely aspect plus the accident configuration. And by the words she said, whether she set herself up for it, it doesn't mean that this should be the outcome at all. It just indicates that she was in that a bit of a self-destructive mood also in the aspect, because of the feelings of aloneness. And instead of just trying to help her, he was just concerned with his own feelings. And people can be a bit cruel, when they are, like in his case, the Venus in Capricorn. Just like, Elvis Presley had that aspect. When there's a lonely eagle aspect. And it's a natural state for a lot of men, but not for women. Especially somebody who has Venus in Taurus like her, that she wants to cuddle all the time and wants to have a family. She would have been a very good mother, actually. And even better grandmother, because it tells stories. It's very hard for me to do this audio, actually, because there are many things which I can see, but because they violate the free choice, I can only go so far. I just want people to know about their aspects of how aloneness can really be the reason why a lot of people do all kinds of crazy things. And her fear of abandonment was very real and not picked up by anybody. Here she's screaming for this aspect, that she's lonely, she's desperate, that the relationship will end and she'll be alone all her life. And that part is a very real feeling in her chart, and goes all the way back to Florida, leaving her alone, just like that. I mean, it's quite obvious that he was also extremely sad. It doesn't show that it's like a not premeditated type of thing, does not show that at all. But the things that happened there, we have to wait for the reports to see what happened. Was it a neck aspect or any theme like that? But he certainly is capable of that. There are some you might say, some psychopathic tendencies, and he was against the system, whether it's a conspiracy aspect and all that, many things at the government level, not he would have been able to see through it. And it's like you work with the Pentagon, you come up with something that they have done something wrong, but you cannot say it because your life is in danger. He was born with this Mercury-Pluto theme. It's like being guided by the angels on one side, but also by the devil on the other side. So he had a very powerful mind, and he could say some cruel things, but I don't think the police handled it well at all, mainly by leaving her alone like that. But they should have asked that a bit more about the fact that he held her face and all that, and maybe she just reached out and just scratching just to defend herself. And it was her car, and he took her car, locked her out of it, took the keys away from her, and she was very much a woman. She was very feminine also, and the Pisces, the Taurus part, they like a strong man. She would not have minded his being, strong. That part I don't think. I think she did like that sort of a man with a quiet authority, a bit of a father figure, and he had a beard. All that part does fit it very well. And there was an underlying caring, but non-spoken. I wish we knew the time of birth. So if any one of you is listening, if you can contact the parents, and I really grieve for the parents also, and especially the mother of Gabby, mother and father of Gabby must be going through a very difficult time, of course, And I'm going to develop a lot of software also. In fact, I've already developed a lot of that so that people can spot the aspect of mental stress. When you go to astrotrends.net, you'll see the article about that mental health. In fact, we have this letkidsdream.org. It's a non-profit organization that I made to help children and youth, actually. But also, I'm going to be making something available for the public so you can see when a person is going through a lonely phase. That's a very important aspect. We've already done that for the mental stress. That every time that mental stress, there are all these shootings that happen, and it affects the entire age group. But if we had the time of birth of Gabby, that would really, really help. And it'll help save a lot of other people who are in a similar condition. You can put your feedback below, but if you can find the time of birth, that would really help. Put in all your theories here. I will reply to you also. I don't want to jump the gun immediately. There are some people who are violent, who are criminal just like that. But there are some others who do out of desperation or when they are feeling extremely lonely. And both of these had that alone aspect, actually. His chart reminds me of that shooter in the theater. He also had that same Mercury in Sagittarius. He was doing a neurology PhD, actually, and they ended up shooting a lot of people. He had that same Venus in Capricorn, same Mercury in Sagittarius. And also the German pilot who took 250 people with them, he also had that same Mercury in Sagittarius as with Pluto and Venus in Capricorn. And he crashed the plane with like 250 people aboard. And I've got some videos on the YouTube channel in Astrocycles. You can check that out also. I haven't done these videos for a long time because I've developed some absolutely fantastic programs that will help all of you. And if you go to Let Kids Dream and also .org, .com, .net, they're all the same, and or astrotrends.net. Very soon you'll be hearing of a lot of things that we have made. I'm not interested in the business or anything. I lost my mother when I was born, but God made me talented in art, music, and sports. I'm an engineer by profession, but astrology is one of my passions, and my main aspect is how to offset a negative theme, something you are born with. Like in her case, if she was a client of mine, I would have definitely suggested working with children and old people and counseling, guiding, helping them. She was an extremely caring and healing type of person. She also would have loved good food, for example. That's that Venus in Taurus, a very nurturing type of aspect. And to get 1 spoon of iron. It's amazing the lack of iron, how it can, and I don't think it's just being anemic aspect. And we can all go through it by transit. The Saturn can touch off that moon also. But if you all can find the time of birth, I would really, really appreciate, and I'll do another audio on that. Hope we can use her experiences in life to benefit a lot of people around the world and to save lives in future. This is Hassan Jaffer, the astrologer, signing off.